Well, it's about time now, 10 after. We're online. Let's bring it down a little bit. I want to welcome everybody that's watching online this morning to our Bible study on Sunday morning at Waldo Baptist Church. We're going to be in the book of Zechariah and the first chapter of the book of Zechariah. If you'd like to turn there. I want to wish everybody watching online a happy Mother's Day, and all of you moms that's here today, a happy Mother's Day. Looks like it's a beautiful day. We hope you enjoy it very much and appreciate, let me say that we appreciate all the prayers you lifted up for Kay. Her surgery went great on Wednesday and even better than we had hoped for. And so she is doing well. She's at home and doing well. And so we just pray for the healing process to set in now. And just wanted to thank you for all your prayers. And those of you that's called, checked, brought food, sent cards, everything that you've done, we appreciate so much. But most of all, we appreciate your prayers because the surgery was absolutely awesome. And so we're very thankful for that. All right, we're in the book of Zechariah. We're in the first chapter. And as we have stated before, this is about 500 years before the birth of Christ. And Zechariah is, there are 8 visions in the book of Zechariah. And many of those visions include not only what is happening shortly, in the present and near future, but also in the future that has not come yet that we have seen. So many times the prophecies will have a dual meaning, a meaning at the present time, near future, and then far future concerning the millennium reign of Christ. And so that is what we see when we look at this second vision that he has. And we began there last Sunday, but I know that some of you may not have been here. But we're beginning in the, I'm going to start reading in the 14th verse of the first chapter and then catch up, and then our study really starts in verse 18. It said, "Then the angel who was speaking to me proclaimed this word. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I am very jealous for Jerusalem and Zion, but I was very angry with the nations that feel secure. I was only a little angry, but they added to the calamity. Therefore, this is what the Lord says. I will return to Jerusalem with mercy, and there my house will be rebuilt, and the measuring line will be stretched out over Jerusalem, declares the Lord Almighty. Proclaim further, this is what the Lord Almighty says. My towns will again overflow with prosperity, and the Lord will again comfort Zion and choose Jerusalem." So here we had, after this first vision that he had of the angel of the Lord in the myrtle trees and the hollow, and we saw that the people, there was about 43,000 that came out of captivity in Babylon and returned to Israel. And those 43,000, they are in great despair because as they have returned, the walls of the city are all torn down, the temple is destroyed, and now they're trying to rebuild everything. So we mentioned last week that Haggai and Nehemiah, Ezra are all contemporaries with Zechariah because they were there leading in the rebuilding of the temple and the walls. Ezra in the coming back with the people to start the rebuilding of the temple. And Nehemiah, if you read and study Nehemiah, it's all about rebuilding the city. It's all about rebuilding the walls. So if you want to know what was going on, you can go to Ezra and Nehemiah there as well as Haggai. And so basically what we see is this. We have about 43,000 Israelites that have returned out of Babylon, where they've been in captivity for 70 years, which was God's judgment upon them for idolatry and the unfaithfulness of the priests. So they have now come out of captivity in the second year of Darius, who was ruler. Something that we mentioned last week, and we're going to be looking at a lot today, is that this is all called and will be until the time of the millennium reign of Christ, the time of the Gentiles. That's what we're in then and now. Because not only were they ruled over by the Babylonians and Nebuchadnezzar, but then by Cyrus and Darius and the Medes and the Persians, and then by the Greeks, Alexander the Great and his generals, and then by Rome itself. So we're going to be looking in Daniel a lot this morning to tie it in with what we see in this second vision in the book of Zechariah. So you keep in mind, and what we see happening in the Middle East today is that we see a people, Israel, that has been killed and persecuted and maimed for thousands of years, literally thousands of years. And now we see the world in general cannot understand why they are going forward and not holding back in the war in Gaza. When Hamas' goal is to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. So you can rest assured that Israel is going to do everything in its power to absolutely destroy Hamas. Absolutely everything within their power. The bad part is that in the meantime, there are hundreds and thousands of civilians that are dying in the process. But you also have to understand that we're talking about Israel as a nation where hundreds of thousands of Jews, children, women, men have been killed for hundreds of years under Gentile rule. This is something else you have to understand. You don't just look at the little picture. You have to see the big picture, the whole picture. And that's what this second vision is all about in the second vision that he has. And beginning in verse 18, "Then I looked up, and there before me were 4 horns. And I asked the angel who was speaking to me, 'What are these?'" You see, if you weren't here before, or you're watching online and you may not have caught this, there are 2 entities that are involved here in this conversation and vision that Zechariah is having. First, there is the angel of the Lord that was on the red horse in the valley. That is Christ. And then you have another angel, which is like an interpreter angel, that is going back and forth between the vision and Zechariah, explaining things to him. So when you look there in the 18th verse, it says, "Then I looked up, and there before me were 4 horns. I asked the angel who was speaking to me." Now that's the interpreter angel, if you will. That is not the angel of the Lord, which is Christ. Okay, so you have to see that there is, in this vision, explanation, conversation that is going on, there's more than one party involved in this. And you also understand that when he says visions, it's not talking about dreams. This is happening not when Zechariah is asleep. If it was, it would say the vision by night, which it does with Daniel. sometimes. But these are visions he's having in the daytime when he's awake that God is giving him. And a lot of times, if you notice there in verse 18, he has these visions, and then he says, and then I look. It's like he's praying. He is in contemplation, and then he says, and then I looked up, because that's what it says in the 18th verse here. So you have all this going on with Zechariah as this is happening. And he answered me. First we have 4 horns, all right, there in verse 18. Well, we know that horns represent 2 different things in prophecy. First of all, they represent power or authority. And then they represent kings or nations. And so when it's talking about horns, it's usually talking about power, authority, kings, and nations, and our kingdoms. When you see horns mentioned, and that's what we see here. And he answered me, these are the horns that have scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. Now this word scattered is a very unusual word. In studying about it, in the original language, it is a word that carries really a triple meaning. It means have scattered, are scattering, and will scatter. It carries the meaning of this is a process that has been happening, is happening, and is going to happen. So it's a verb that covers all this territory. Has happened, is happening, will happen. And so these 4 horns then are identified as powers, authorities, kings, kingdoms that scatter Israel, then, before, and after. Okay, so that's the picture that you get when you look at these. He answered me, these are the horns that scattered Judah, Israel, and Jerusalem. Then the Lord showed me 4 craftsmen, and I asked, what are these coming to do? And he answered, these are the horns that scattered Judah, so that no one could raise his head, but the craftsmen have come to terrify them and throw down these horns of the nations who lifted up their horns against the land of Judah to scatter its people. So now we have a further part of the vision. Someone is coming to tear down the kingdoms, the kings, the powers and authorities that have scattered Israel and Judah over these hundreds of years. All right. Now then, we're going to the book of Daniel. Okay? Let's go back to the book of Daniel now. Let's see. We're going, I'm not contemplating whether to start in verse 7 or chapter 7 or chapter 2. Well, we're going to chapter 2. Chapter 2. Go there first and then to chapter 7. Now you remember they're in captivity in Babylon, the Chaldeans. Nebuchadnezzar is who? He is the ruler. He is the king. He is the power and authority. That's one of the horns, okay? That's the first of the 4 horns, okay? In the second, get through this, it's going to be a miracle. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. So the king summoned his magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. And when they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I've had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. Then the astrologers answered the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it. And the king replied to the astrologers, This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me. Once more they replied, Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it. The king answered, I'm certain that you're trying to gain time, because you realize this is what I have firmly decided. All right, now what's going on here? King had this dream. So he calls what they called wise men. Astrologers that went by the stars, anyone that was in his kingdom that was supposed to be able to tell him what dreams meant, what prophecy meant, what foretell, what everything meant. He gathered them all together. And he said, not only are you going to tell me what the dream means, you're going to tell me the dream. And he says, if you don't, I'm going to kill all of you and all of your children, and all of your wives, and all of your families. So to say they were under pressure is a little understating the fact. But this is what they answer. If you look down in verse 10 of the second chapter, it says, the astrologers answered the king, There's not a man on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician, enchanter, or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except, the gods. But we know there's one God, and they do not live among men. Well, Daniel is one of the king's wise men. So that means Daniel is going to be the word comes to Daniel, he's gathered all the wise men together, and he will be one of those that will be put to death. And so we carry on in the narrative, and verse 17 of the second chapter, Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and he urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning the mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Now look at this, verse 19. During the night the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He sets up kings and disposes them. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. I thank and praise you, verse 23, O God of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. So what do we see then? We see that God has revealed the dream and the vision to Daniel. You see, God always has a plan. God always has a plan. Now, when he sent that vision through that dream to Nebuchadnezzar, at first it would seem as though it was a terrible thing because no one could interpret it. But now we understand it is a God thing because he has revealed the dream and the vision and the interpretation to Daniel. And he is the only one that can do it. Now then, I'm going to verse 26 of the second chapter. Chapter 2, verse 26. The king asked Daniel, also called Belshazzar, Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he's asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and visions that pass through your mind as you lay on your bed are these. As you were lying there, O king, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than other living men, but so that you, O king, may know the interpretation, and that you may understand what went through your mind. You looked, O king, and before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. And while you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, and the bronze, the silver and gold were broken in pieces at the same time and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer, and the wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Now then, so this is the vision. This is the vision that he had. Now, it is so clear and so precise when you're looking back upon what has happened instead of forward on what will happen, that God is so precise in that which he reveals that it is utterly amazing. And you probably have in chapter 7 a picture. If you have a study Bible, you might have a picture of that statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw. I know my NIV study Bible does. I don't know how many of you have that, but let me just run down these different. You remember what was the vision in Zechariah? 4 horns, 4 powers, authorities, 4 kings and kingdoms. All right. Now, what did Daniel just tell Nebuchadnezzar? He said, you saw a statue. You saw a statue. And he said, the head of that statue was pure gold. He said, you looked at the statue and you saw the head of that was gold. He said, O King Nebuchadnezzar, that represents you and your kingdom. That represents you and your kingdom, the great Chaldean Babylonian kingdom of which you are the King of Kings. And so he was explaining to Nebuchadnezzar, and this is the beginning of the time of the Gentiles. You hear it's said in the Bible over and over again. That means that when they went into captivity for 70 years, that began the time of the Gentiles. That time of the Gentiles is going to run all the way to the millennium. It will be the time of the Gentiles. The Antichrist will be the last Gentile ruler in the time of the Gentiles. You got the picture? The Antichrist will be the last Gentile ruler in the time of the Gentiles. Now, before I go on and explain all the rest of this to you, I want to show you something just absolutely awesome here. You look at what I read to you. I'm going to go back to chapter 2, and I'm going to read it to you again. Okay, I'm going to start reading in verse 45 of the second chapter of Daniel. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands. You say, what in the world is a rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands? It is Christ. It is Christ. Christ came into this world not born, conceived of human origin. When it says it's a rock, Christ many times is called the rock, the foundation stone. But it didn't come made by humanity. It came from God above. That's why it says a rock that was not cut out by human hands. This is what it's talking about here. It's talking about Christ. Okay, notice what it said. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hand. A rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, and the pieces. Because what happens at the end of the time of the Gentiles and the beginning of the millennium reign, all the nations are gathered together against Israel and Jerusalem. But the rock cut out of the mountain that becomes, it says, a mountain that fills the whole earth, okay, is going to crush what? It says into pieces like chaff on a threshing floor. In other words, Christ is going to destroy all the Gentile armies and their rulers that have gathered against Israel and Jerusalem when he comes in his second coming at the beginning of the millennium reign. This is the end of the time of the Gentiles. And it talks about Christ then, the rock, not cut out by human hands, is going to become a huge mountain that fills the whole earth. In other words, the rule of Christ will be over the whole earth at that time, during the millennium reign of Christ, when he sets up his throne in the capital city of Jerusalem. Now, can you imagine this? 500 years before the birth of Christ, God sends Nebuchadnezzar this vision, and he sees this vision, and this prophecy is revealed, and Zechariah, the prophet and priest, sees the same thing, the four horns, and the explanation. And all of this is coming down through the eons of time, called the times of the Gentiles, prophesying the end of the time of the Gentiles, and Israel and Jerusalem being made the greatest kingdom on earth, with Christ as its ruler and his reign covering the whole earth. Well, why is this so important? Why is it so important that God revealed this back to Zechariah and then to Daniel? Because at the time of Zechariah, the people were in such distress and dismay, because even though they had come back home, they had no home to come to. It had been completely destroyed. Completely destroyed. I was studying about this and the brutality of the nations that destroyed Israel and Jerusalem over time. And Antiochus Epiphanes is one of those rulers, and we'll get to him. But they took the ruler of Jerusalem at that time They killed all of his family in front of him. They burned his eyes out, and then they took him captive into the land with his eyes burned out after he saw all his family killed before him. What I'm trying to get you to see and understand is, now I'm going to go back and read you something I already read to you out of Zechariah, where it says, I'm in Zechariah chapter 1, and I'm in verse 14 of the first chapter of Zechariah. Then the angel who was speaking to me said, proclaim this word. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I'm very jealous for Jerusalem and Zion, but I am very angry with the nations that feel secure. I was only a little angry, but they added to the calamity. In other words, the nations that destroyed Israel and Jerusalem went above and beyond in their brutality. And God says, I am very displeased and angry with them. I'm trying to get you an overview. We look at what's going on in Gaza today, and we say, that is a horrible, terrible thing, and Israel itself should be punished for this. But then, what people don't realize, you look back over centuries of time, how many thousands of Israelites, and the brutality and the murder and the mayhem and just the inhumanity they went through. And then you kind of get a mindset of how they're trying to protect themselves today. When you realize we're talking about for hundreds of years, these people have been persecuted. They have been murdered, they have been mayhem, they have been tortured, they have been killed. And what I'm saying is, I don't like what's going on in Gaza with children and parents and civilians being killed either. But you have to understand where Israel is coming from. You have to understand where they're coming from. And when Biden looks at Netanyahu and says, you shouldn't be doing this, Netanyahu is saying, you haven't been through what we've been through. So just shut up. That's the picture that we get. So we'll continue here next Sunday morning and go on through these visions. We'll get through this one vision maybe next Sunday morning. But I want you to see all the parts of it and how it ties in with everything that has happened, is happening, and is going to happen. In a book in the Bible, 500 years before Christ was born, that is going to come to fruition before your very eyes. And that makes it even more real, I think. But anyway, this is slow progress, I know, but I'd rather go slow and not miss anything than to just give you a Reader's Digest version. So, okay. I guess we're offline now. Yes.